Watch. This is Toksa Hour. I am Maggie Ross, and I'm live from Porcupine, South Dakota, along the Porcupine Creek where the porcupines roam. And we are joined again by Chaz, or with Chaz, or yay, we have Chaz. Chaz is here.
Good morning. You can't tell, but I'm having, and I was a little bit late, but I'm having some kind of weird allergic reaction. I'm flushed. My whole face is really red. So if I stop breathing in the middle, then
911.
call 911. I'm just hopefully no, it's okay. I think it's something I don't know what the hell's going on. But how are you? It's been a crazy week, and I know I promised I would visit with my friend Lewis, but I totally forgot until this morning, and I didn't get a hold of him. So I will make sure he is on next week because he's down in Lower Brule and Crow Creek and Rosebud. No, I don't think Rosebud. But his people are out there. He needs to be visiting with them. And he's one of my long time friends, and I've known him since fighting the Keystone Pipeline. I went when I started when we were doing that. He's down at Lower Brule, and him and his family really stood up against the tribal chairman at the time, Mike Jandrew, who was totally in favor of the Keystone Pipeline, as was Harold Fraser, my chairman at the time. I think he also supported the Keystone Pipeline. But back in the day before DAPL and everything, there was the Keystone, and so he's one of my good buddies, turned brothers. Him and his sister are twins, and so that I think that's why, like, I trust him so much, because he's a twin, and his sister is, he understands things from his sister's perspective. So he's really got a good, kind heart. So I will definitely make sure he gets on this week. And I had a couple of things I would like for us to talk about. Number one, the crime summit that they had out in Rapid City. Did you read about that, hear about that? Or did you go to it? There was a lot of people there apparently. And I happened to be in town at the same time because I had to go return my vehicle. And someone asked if I was going over there. I was like, no, like I'm not gonna go over, like, and my approach to the whole crime thing is that, sure, and you guys, and now since weapons have been happening, we have horrible crime in the on the reses. And but more money and more cops has never solved any of our problems, and it never will. And I think that because it was coming from the Fed, the Trump administration, it was a national propaganda thing that they were putting out, and they have been putting out about brown people being dangerous and needing to be in jail. And but I do understand that right now we have such horrible gun violence on our reses that never didn't exist before. Back in the day, when things needed to when you were fighting about something, just like go to blows. Like, what, that's okay, people don't die during that. You get beat up or whatever. But those kinds of things, if that it's a different situation. But I don't think that the solution is imprisoning or any kind of jail. I'm an abolitionist. I think that the cops right now are a gang state, and are really just perpetuating and reinforcing white supremacy in so many ways because of the state of the situation. In the state of South Dakota, where 20% of the population, 80% of the jails, that's not fair. That's not justice. And I think that a lot of times people don't really understand what justice means, because we've been propagandized to think criminals all the time. And most of the people that are in the jails are addicts and alcoholics who need help, traumatized, who have anger issues, all of these things. And if you have money and you fall into jail with that kind of stuff, you get off. Scott, you got a good lawyer, you get out. The people, there's a two-tier justice system in America, and the poor people end up in jail forever. and, or, for things that are, not important. And so anyway, that was on my feed a lot in this week about the tribal, IRA, politicians, out there, talking about the crime and, I think that, in so many ways, I'm just really frustrated with their, just, going along with whatever the feds are coming out with. And, our problems aren't, something that we, that can be solved from the outside in, right? It's not, now, none of our problems are gonna be solved by the outside in. You bring more people in, you bring more gang members in, and they're gonna do what they're gonna do. And, force us into jail. And, a lot of times, it's federal jail because of, what happens. And, it's not good for anyone. So anyway, I just wanted to hear your take on that. I think we've, talked about, abolition and then that kind of stuff right now or here. So I was just, curious about your take.
I'm probably like you. I mean, one of the things that I think about is the militarization of our police forces. And a lot of that came from the war in the Middle East, during George W. Bush and then Obama, where they're producing more weapons, and then you can't sell them, right? Like, then what do you do with them? So then you have to sell them or get the police departments to buy them. And then a lot of times you have people that are they like guns, so you get people and you do a gun show, take police chief people or whatever, and then that's what they, yeah, that's what we could use. Yeah, I can envision it. We could have this flame torture, and
Yeah.
we could torch down a door instead of knocking or whatever, like when they try to run away, we could just flame torch them or whatever. And I'm being exaggerated, but
Well, they have those shock gloves, those shock gloves. They're
yes,
killing.
and I saw those now. And so it's like, really, people do not acknowledge that we are becoming a police state. And fear of safety is used against us. And so this is the thing, like data. So data, we could have data and we could use data to help make arguments, but it can also be used to scare you. If you do not know how to read data, look at data, ask questions, do all of those things, then you fall plight. I was saying that there's this one website, it says, and I used it for my when I was teaching statistics. I had my students go and we had to look at different, or I would go and I would bring up a website and say, what, let's talk about this website, and it'd be giving off data. And so one would say one said 98% of our students graduate from high school by going through this program. And then it says 90% of our students, and all these outcomes. So I said, what's wrong with it? And they're like, that's really good statistics. You're looking at it and you're like, yeah, wow, that's really good. I said, but nowhere on the webpage does it tell us how many actual students are involved in that program. Is it 10? Is it 5? And then it doesn't tell you, like, you don't see like who there's no way to prove or disprove them, because you don't know if because a lot of times some of the things that we do, we don't go and serve the disadvantaged. We go serve the mediocre to advantage, because that's going to boost our numbers. We can show a success rate. So we want these students, these people to be in here, because they're going to be more willing to do the things and get the rewards and go forward. We don't want these ones in here, because these ones are going to be resistant. They're not going to want to do it, and they're going to drag our statistics down. And education did this for a long time through No Child Left Behind. So the problematic people, they just wanted you out. those people who didn't take testing serious, we wanted you out of the system. And so all of this this process that we're doing, and it fits in this mold of what's happening. And we've, I've been saying, you've been saying, people, we are not the only voices in concern. There's Natalie Stites up in our Natalie Stites Means. I always get in trouble because she's married and her name is Means. We call her Natalie Stites, and then her husband is my cousin. And so anyways. So, she does all of this stuff in regards to justice, and she sits on some of the committees in the state, in this, in the federal government, and she produces all of this information too, and she willingly shares it. And then everybody acts like nobody's ever said anything. And people have been speaking on this even before me. Like when I was young, in Rapid City, there was my grandmother, her name was Cecilia Montgomery. And then she was teamed up with another lady named Mary Wright. And there were other elderly women within Rapid City Indian community that were always going and addressing these things.
That's
so
right.
They were saying that there's injustice, not just in healthcare, but in education and in the community. And so there's been a whole flat steps, whatever, of people that have been advocating and saying, so nothing is brand new here. It hasn't changed. But yet we make these arguments from a government perspective to say we need more money because we need more policing. While you need more community policing. When Bill Clinton did community policing, on my reservation, we knew who our cops were. Even before community policing, we knew who our cops were. We had cops assigned to our community. And so they would sit and see, so you knew they were there. They would drive through, like I grew up in Evergreen community. They would be driving through with their sirens on, letting us know it's curfew. There's just different things like that would happen. And people knew, but then my tribe, the Oglala Sioux tribe, that this big, well, it really it wasn't really a big idea of like making change for the betterment. They did it because they didn't like, one, we had a council rep that got picked up for DWI, and they were gonna, that council rep is gonna get prosecuted or whatever. And we had another one that was picked up for marijuana. And so the thing then that what they did was they dismantled public safety. They changed the structure of the board. They put it to a 3-member board, and then they just started messing around with it. And so then so then they would put the hits on the police officers, get rid of them, and so then they were just always changing the system of police officers. And so then that made it very hard for communities. Like you don't have no trust because you don't know who the police officers are. And then you were getting some rowdy and rough police officers that are roughing you up, but then you don't have nowhere to complain because then we get back into the cronyism because they're all bros with tribal council or the judiciary committee or whatever. And so that happens. And so the destabilization of our communities to violence is happening within the reservations. So if Rapid City is becoming more violent, well, we have to acknowledge it. We can't be crying ground because we're the ones that are kicking people off the reservation for meth. And that's where they go.
I mean, I think that the summer, how many gun deaths have happened in Rapid City? Not too many. How many in Rosebud and Pine Ridge? Several. And so, I think that what's happening is that guns are cheap. People can buy them anywhere now. I can go to Runnings and buy a $350 pistol. I don't need nothing. I can just walk right in there and get it. And so guns are now creating that Wild West mentality. Even back in the day, you had to turn your weapon in as you walked into Tombstone, right? That was they controlled weapons. And now since the NRA, and I think you hit it on the head when you said, it started with the after 9/11 with the DHS and the upgrade of giving the weapons, these military weapons to the police. They have the military. No one needs a tank. And yet when I was in Minneapolis, they used a tank in to try to get a drug dealer. I watched it. We all thought it was ICE, so we were all watching, but they came in with a tank. And so, the point of it all, I think, is what you said before, is that, we have been speaking up against this, and no one listens. I always go back to this quote that I have from this guy Candy Rock, that was from David Graeber's book, The Dawn of Everything. He talked about the conversation between the Seneca man Candy Rock and the European, when the European asked him, where are your prisons? How do you take care of your bad people? And Candy Rock says, what sort of men need threat of punishment to do good? And so I think that, the point of it all is that we raise, our society is based on criminality, right? The theft of land, the theft of humans, the enslavement of humans. And so it's perpetuated. It's been perpetuated for 250 years, right? It's criminality. Criminals run. I mean, especially now in this administration, the criminals are in charge. And the level of criminality that President Trump is showing, and MAGA is just like accepting it. He's enriching himself billions of dollars since in 1 year, like $2.1 billion in 1 year he's made. And that's not, something that we're upset about. No, we're upset about, they just make stuff up. And I think that, at this point now, the media is perpetuating, they're pushing us toward, I think, race wars in a big way, so that they can imprison us. And it's all about the prison state. They can control us. They can make us work. I mean, a lot of those prisons in the South are for-profit prisons where people have to work or they get punished, and so they're slaves. Since when slavery stopped, that's when the slaves were then imprisoned into state-owned prisons that they were then enslaved and shared out with the corporations. So slavery, the same mentality has existed throughout our country's a whole history, and people don't put that together, that right now people are acting out because, well, yeah, it's the Wild West, and now there's no rule of law. Everyone's seeing what Trump is doing, so everyone's got such very little disrespect, and so the point of it now is that we have to do what we've always done, is raise good people and be good people, and not and protect each other. That's I like the the protector movement. It's not just about water. We have to protect our own, and we have to protect our way of life. We have to protect our land. How many of our reservations protect our groundwater? Ours don't. We allow non-Indian farmers and ranchers to pollute, or to put pesticides and to spray insecticides and all that all over our land, all over our cropland. We allow that to happen. And so I think that the police, and also, did you see anything from Minneapolis about the Jake Lang going there?
Jake Lang going to jail?
Oh, he got beat up, and he got beat up. And I was watching the videos from it, because I follow all those guys over in Minneapolis because of what happened with ICE. But I was almost in tears seeing all these white people, these queer white folks, freaking battling out with this guy. I mean, they were attacking him, and they didn't give him one moment's rest. And the mayor over there said, "Oh, don't get fired up. Don't protest." Because he's a Zionist. He said, don't protest, we don't want to protest. But all the people out there were just like, oh, heck yeah. And they freaking kicked that guy out of there. And he got arrested and they made it intolerable for folks like that to be even in the thing. And I think that a lot of times we forget that we have to protect each other. And Minneapolis has really learned that lesson. And they are doing it, on the ground, creating these networks of people who respond to white supremacy, right? I mean, that's what they're responding to. And hate, they're standing up against hate. And I just shared something on Facebook by the Jolly Good Ginger. That guy, he's a you know him? He's always attacking racists and stuff, but he's an activist. He's a former vet, and he's been going over all these places. And he said something about how Minneapolis is so great because it's led by Black and Indigenous people, and it is. Indigenous people are in the movements, in doing the things, and the queer folk and the woke city of Minneapolis have learned and listen and do what they're told, and not and contribute when they can, which is what's supposed to happen. I think that a lot of times people don't understand that we know what to do. Us Indigenous people, as people on the ground, grassroots people, Black folks, we know how to solve the problems in our communities. Like you said, everyone, Natalie, everyone, we've been listening for years and years and years. I would throw Lorette Pouyer in that conversation, and Jean Roach, and there's other people in Rapid City who have been teaching and fighting those guys for a long time, but no one listens. And that's because of the white supremacist state that we exist in. And I think that the Trump administration is really just playing on that. And that's Israel's goal, right? To create a system where we don't trust each other and we're fighting against each other so that they can come in and create to do what they want. I was reading something that and I wanted to bring it up too. Gary, Indiana has been without power now for almost 11 days. And the state of Indiana hasn't really done anything to support them. And Gary, Indiana is primarily Black. And I read something somewhere that Israel wants to create a community in Indiana. So a big storm comes in and they just let it go, like Katrina, because I think that we don't pay enough attention to these disasters that come in and these things happen. Absolutely. Hurricane Katrina, my dad died the night that Hurricane Katrina came in. So I didn't even really pay attention to that at the time. But, in retrospect, that was an intended, devastation, destruction of people's homes. And, they broke that levee. They did it on purpose. And then, people came in and were, targeting vulnerable people with weapons, sometimes even shooting them, gangs going through there. And that's the intention. They're going to, destroy our safety net and make it and let us turn into like animals and killing each other. And that's it's their policy. It's what they're doing. And I think that I've just lost so much respect and trust in the systems that we have because of the second Trump administration. I wanted to talk about too. There's a lot of talk about the election being rigged, and I think that I was listening to a couple of creators. Something happened in New York State. There was one precinct where all the numbers were too similar. And so there's a lawsuit happening, and I actually have lost track of it. But I don't think he won any election. I think he stole I think the Russian interference in 2016 helped him get through through Clinton. I think that there was absolute Russian interference that happened in 2016. In 2020, I think they rigged it. But because there was so much mail-in ballots that year because of COVID, I think he couldn't win. That's why he's so obsessed with mail-in ballots. And so I think he tried to win it. And I think 2024, he definitely stole it. I think Elon Musk and some of the electronic tallies and all that stuff. There's a couple of different lawsuits still from that. And so I think that what we're witnessing is really the end of the United States empire in so many ways. And as Indian people, it behooves us to move back into our cultural values and really build that community that they tried to beat out of us at the boarding schools.
I think that there's like a lot of different things that are taking place. And so I think when you keep people in chaos, or like you emotionally or mentally exhaust people by you're just always just clowning around and doing things, so and then you're not paying attention to the bigger things or the actual things that are going on. And so they are saying that Elon Musk was involved, that there was some shenanigans that happened. I don't know that they know the full extent of it yet, and they probably will not. And I think like the bigger thing would be the government, when it's done, they should be sanctioning Elon Musk. They should be sanctioning all of these billionaires. I mean, if the Democrats take control and it is what they call the Democratic Socialists or whatever, if the progressives take and get the majority of Congress and get control of the Senate, I think that that's what the things that they should be doing is like really saying, making the changes. But that probably won't happen. Like it's something. I mean, like AOC is putting herself out there, but she is no different. And
No, I don't trust her at all.
yeah, I look at her and I think, oh, that's exciting, but then at the same time, you voted present. At the same time, like you're backstepping defunding the police instead of explaining what defunding the police really means. It doesn't mean that you don't have law enforcement. It means that you're going to put money within mental health. You're going to put money to building your community. So we're not going to do that. We're going to go back to like community policing, or we're going to sponsor youth movements and youth groups, and we're going to contribute money to the Boys and Girls Club, or to all these different things that give activity and function. So where families are struggling, there's a safety net or a safe place for them to be. I was really watching this conversation about Social Security. And so millennials are really upset about Social Security, and they're upset about the silent generation and the boomers, because there's an accusation that gets made coming from this group of millennials that are trying to buy homes, trying to live a life, and they can't afford it. And so then they can't get education, they can't do any of these things because Roosevelt did the thing, right? He created the New Deal. And in the New Deal, different things were supposed to happen. And so the boomers got free education, basically. They're tuition was, $2,000 at most.
Yep.
And they got all of these things, and then they pulled up the ladder, they gate kept. They said, nope, you guys don't get it because that's fluff. That's like a private matter. That's, all these different things. And so being upset because boomers or the silent generation sets this up and says this is what needs to happen. The boomers come, and then the boomers get to take advantage of all of these things, and then they get to turn around and talk to people about pulling yourselves up by your bootstraps when they've taken the boot and the straps, so
Right.
you can't,
That's
you
exactly
can't
right. That's exactly. And then Reagan comes in and lowers the income tax on millionaires and billionaires from 70% to 30%, and then creates, for-profit education, like,
Yep.
and healthcare, so these are all policy decisions that folks have made, that the corporate state have made, by buying the political folks. And, in reaction, I think, to Roosevelt, I think it to the New Deal. I think, the corporations, they were tired of, dealing with folks like Jimmy Carter, and
Yep, and then there's evidence, like that shows their plan. And I can't remember the guy they pin it on, but he's the one that starts the plan, and then he goes out and he says we need to take over politics, we need to fund these things, we need to do all of this stuff, and then change the script so then it becomes something like we can't afford it. It's costing too much money, all of these different things. And then they change the narrative also, like if you tax the rich, then there's no job creation, all
yeah,
of this stuff. So it's taken a long time to get us where we are. And then
mhm.
you look at Social Security. So the millennials don't even get to benefit, or Gen Z or any of the other ones coming. And Gen X is kind of, we're getting screwed by it as well, because they keep moving the post. When can you retire? What is going to be left? We're not even going to have Medicare because Donald Trump just is doing stuff to that. And so anyway, so they were saying, or talking about that. And then it reminded me of back when um I think Bill Clinton was running, and he was talking about that Congress had borrowed money from Social Security, and they didn't pay it back. And so then there's this whole process then of saying, well, maybe some of the reason why our Social Security is in trouble is because Congress keeps secretly taking the money. It's kind of what they're doing to the post office, right?
Right.
Take
And
post office money.
Doge just took all that money from the science funding and everything. HHS, they took all that money, and there's no accountability for all that. But also, you mentioned No Child Left Behind before, and that, is also a part of the policy. It's the policy of making the voters illiterate. They decrease the literacy, and make, dumb people don't see consequences. Don't say dumb, illiterate. They don't see the connections. They can't make these connections because they don't have the capability of their brain doesn't function like that. They were never taught to challenge stuff, and so, that's what we have, is we have a bunch of people who are, who just trust that the state is watching out for them. And, I think during COVID was our first wake up call, and the folks on the front line, they were sacrificed. There are sacrificed populations in the United States. They don't care. I think, we are a sacrificed population. They don't care about us. They don't, they don't want to, solve the problems. They just want to continue to perpetuate the status quo. And the status quo is, us as, virtual, just dependent nations. And, we cannot ever, be sovereign until we actually act in our sovereign. And, and sovereignty, I think, is something that a lot of people talk about an Indian country, but not a lot of people understand it. And, if we're sovereign, we should be, we should have our own, identity and our own culture. And so I think a lot of folks are like, oh, this is just the way it is. This is just the way it is. We have to work with the feds. The feds have to, we're a part of the United States. Since Standing Rock, I really, because I didn't vote in that election. That was my first election ever in my whole life. I never voted, and I'm such a little nerd about voting and civics and stuff. I just love that. And it was like, but I knew Trump and Clinton, Clinton who pushed this, the pipeline we were fighting and getting attacked for. I lost a lot of respect for the Democrats because of Obama, because of DAPL. If you can still like support the Obama administration that gave us DAPL, it's a bigger person than I am. And a lot of these people our IRA leaders will be like, oh, Obama was so great. Obama was so great. And just disconnecting from the fact that, that was his pipeline that we all, fought against so heartily. And, but, I think that, we have to, separate ourselves and really, and that's, I talked about this last week too. And I said that, Russell Means was right. We need a Republic of Lakota. We need a common identity again. And I think that so many times in our schools, our elementary schools and stuff, we're preparing people for the outside world. Well, why don't we just prepare people for being here? Like, why can't we be concentrating? I came home. I'm one of those people, like, as soon as I was graduated from high school, my dad was like, you're out of here, girl. Go to college, do something good, and and we'll support the heck out of you. And they did. When I graduated from college, my aunties all came, and it was a really profound moment for me. Unfortunately, I was, a drunken kid. I didn't really appreciate it. But they came and they gave me my first star quilt I ever got, and it really made me feel good. But my dad had the idea that if I went out and did what Sitting Bull told us, take from them, make our people better. He wanted me to go off and to do stuff and be successful. And I'm a good organizer. I've been able to do what I can. But when I came home to work here at the radio station and before for COVID, I was happier than heck. And the reaction I get most often is, why did you come back? Why do you, what do you think is great about here? I mean, I come to work, happy every day because I love to do, to do that, to be sharing news and information with my people. Like, I was born and bred for that. And I feel like that's like, a career highlight. I don't have a big, huge house. I don't have a bunch of cars. I don't have all this stuff. But, I have been able to, to inform and entertain my people. And that's enough for me. And I think that, when we focus our kids on success in the non-Indian world, we sort of prepare them to disconnect from our identity as relatives, right? Because you can't be a good relative really when you're in the corporate world and you got to stab your colleagues in the back so you get a raise. You can't be a good relative when you have to enforce laws that are detrimental to our children's spirits and stuff. You can't be a good relative when you're reinforcing the erasure of our people and celebrating the colonizers, right?
I think that depends though. Like, it depends on the mindset of your business. So if your business is based off of the capitalism and eat the poor, then yeah, that would be true. And then you see a lot of models of business models changing where they do they're taking on like Eastern business models are kind of becoming a thing. So you go and look at what's going on, like how China, when they build business, they might hire their relatives, they might do all of those things, but it's kind of like what we would have done from a Lakota perspective, is that everybody has a responsibility, and the responsibility is get the work done. And so it didn't matter if you're how close the relationship is. It's about whether or not you're getting the work done. And so the work then to get things moving. And so I think there's the capitalist view of the billionaire class. Yes, that's for sure. But there are some entities, and then there's research too that shows, there's a because we do have like a higher we have, where the United States is an immigrant country or whatever. And so we do have a lot of people that come from China. We do have a lot of people that come from the Middle East that come with these different types of philosophies and ideologies that does not necessarily fit. So then they start changing some of the structure of how business is. And so the accountability pieces. And so you're here to do this work, so you need to do this work and not be the other, the cronyism where, oh, that's my uncle, and so I don't even have to come to work, or I don't have to do nothing, and I'm just going to get my 80 hours and just live that life. And so I think it really depends. And I say that too from a Lakota perspective, is that we should be doing that as well, like in government and wherever, is that it's just something that my grandfather always said to us, is like, if a relative ever hires you, you should work the hardest for them and never make it be so that somebody is talking, gee, they just hired their relative and then they're not even, making them look bad. So you should be working the hardest to make them look good because they hired you. And so like that mindset has to change. And so cronyism, has been a part of the IRA, cronyism, and it isn't, like sometimes I want to get mad at our tribal leadership and stuff, but this stuff is ingrained, and as long as we're kind of attached to the BIA, then that becomes problem, and then we don't really control and say over who we are and how we want to move forward. And so we have a lot of good people. We have educated people, uneducated people, good people. They're hard workers. They do good things, but then this whole system creates. So this is what education does for us. You go to the tribal council and you say, what kind of degrees should we offer? And so then the OST says to OLC, these are the types of things we need: business managers, we need math people, whatever they say. These are the things we need. And so then OLC creates the programming for it. And then you graduate hundreds of people with those degrees. But you turn around and you look back at the Oglala Sioux tribe and you say, well, how many director positions do you have open? Because most people, they get those jobs and they stay there. And so you're creating this brain drain because there's actually no work for them, because we all of the work right here. And then we don't want to bring more people into the fold, because the more people participate and contribute and all of those things, then the leadership may not be the leadership. You might start moving towards and saying, this is the type of leader we want. This is, like we're moving this, the people are moving the tribe, versus right now our tribes are run by the council and the presidents or the chairpersons. And so if those guys aren't healthy, if they're not people building entities, if they are just, struggling in their own traumas, struggling in their own personal issues, well, then you're not going anywhere. And then you create a festering system of toxicity. And and that's what we have today. I'm sorry, but that's what we have.
We definitely do. And you know what? I think that in so many ways, IRA governments are, I mean, they're not of us, they're not by us, they were made for us. We didn't have say in those governments. We had a little bit, when they came to it, we could do some stuff, but mostly no, that's what the Bureau said that we should do, and that's what we've been doing. And I think in a lot of ways for so many of us, it's about the trauma, right? The trauma of colonization, the trauma of boarding school, the trauma of capitalism, all of that stuff is violent. And violence, is the reason why we're, even in this situation, is because of the violent taking and the violent, way that the United States colonized us. And I think that, for us, it's a hard thing because, were we colonized because we had a treaty? And do we still have, that nation that, can back up a treaty? In a lot of ways, I don't think so, because a lot of our leaders identify with the IRA, mentality, which is just, a mimicry of the cronyism, all that stuff is how non-Indians, it's how the federal government runs. Exactly how the federal government runs. That's why, Donald Trump's son-in-law is deciding, peace agreements with the world, is because of cronyism, right? I mean, it's not because he's the best guy for the job. It's because Donald is in, there's a sphere of control. There's a little, a cabal of control happening, and he's in it. And that's what happens on our little councils, on our reservations too. There's they get to be this little cabal of control of people, who, and then, and that happens in non-Indian politics too. I've been around, Democratic politics in South Dakota for a long time. And a lot of times, some of those folks don't even like the voter, and I remember one time, one of she was head of the Pennington County Democrats. She said to me that the voters are stupid. And I was so offended because I'm a voter. I'm do not go, and the people are our people, doing we're thinking about, getting the vote out, all that stuff. Our people are so apathetic or, to the system because it's not a part of it, right? It's not part of us. It targets us. We're the target of the state system a lot. And so, why would we want to participate in a system that erases us and doesn't include us and doesn't really include our values? I would really like to find, some places where the state government is acting that has, that is in with our values. Our education is not. Our school, our elders, the way we treat elders, that's not, the vulnerable people, that's not the earth, that's not, there's just, all these places where our public policy is, opposite of our values. And that's why, I think that for us, a lot of times, and this is what they say too about the revolution, the revolution is internal, right? The revolution is internal. If you find yourself, in a place where you're in opposition to everything around you, then maybe you're not supposed to be there. Just move on. And I think that but for traumatized folks, a lot of people stay in those trauma states. And so the IRA government is a trauma state put on us when we had, we didn't want it, we didn't choose it. And yet this is the way that we do everything, is because we were told to do it, and our elders, had to make that decision to choose it. They had to choose these governments. It wasn't a choice. They were gonna, in order for them to maintain themselves as an entity, they had to do that at the time. And so I think that all of us have the capability of finding that peace that capitalism destroys and white supremacy destroys, If you're not I think white supremacy destroys peace in everyone, even if you're white. But I think that, that we have to just live with those values that our ancestors did. And, a lot of our spiritual teachers, well, I think I remember one of them, and I don't remember saying that, but, he told us that, fool's quote, he said, we have to make ourselves hollow bones. And when you're full of capitalism and white supremacy and all those negative messages that come from us, our insides are full of, messages that aren't our own. And so, in order for us to really, be able to live the way our ancestors, we have to free ourselves from those negative messages of capitalism and white supremacy. And then we can start to, protect the vulnerable. And then we stand up. You know what I mean? I think that's the way you become a true, authentic, Indigenous person in this day and age, is when we're authentically living our values the same values that our ancestors had. You know what I mean?
I think that sometimes too, like, we get lost in all of that messaging because you still have external forces trying to dictate and tell us. So are we socialists? That's what people tell us we are. That's where we need to move to socialism. And then oftentimes and we see this how we get exploited. And so they'll take something from, well, this is how your ancestors used to live, and this is what they used to do. And so that's what this is. And so they're very similar, so we should support it. And I struggle with all of it at times, because I think that we didn't have a name for how we lived, other than when we talk about like something like Wola Kota or Midakoye Oyasi. When we talk about things like that, that's where we would exist. We didn't, because we had love and care for each other, and then also you were able to function within. You had the right to choose. So this year I'm gonna go live with my my spouse's people, and we're gonna go over there. We're gonna live amongst them, and then maybe the spouse says, "Let's go back to your people." And let's go live. And then you had functions within all of those things. Everybody had a place. Everybody had something to do. Everybody like that. And there was no such thing as coins and stuff, even though we did trade. We know about elk teeth, and we know that we did do trading. But our trading wasn't to be to have the most.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at things like that, and so I kind of get somehow whenever, like, I want to support the democratic socialists and things like that. But then I look at some of the things that they say, and I'm like, I don't even know if you guys really understand what you're saying. Because you're putting a lot of stuff out there and you're not talking to people like, maybe I'm a potential person to be in their movement, but I don't I look at some of that stuff, and I think the individual responsibility that you have. So this is a Lakota perspective. We live in a group and we take care of each other, but you can't take care of each other if you do not do your part. So there was no, I get to just be in my room, and kids get to be on devices or whatever. You're up doing things, and everybody had to learn how to do it. That's how we survived for millennials of millennials, is every child got up. It was modeled by their parents and grandparents, and then they went on and they did the cycle. But we don't do that anymore. Like, we're just passive people, and then we accepted that we're consumers, and then we just want somebody else to make it, and we'll buy it, and then we'll throw it away. We're a part of the corruption and the litter and all of that. I mean, I've been really looking at myself again because of the amount of plastic I'm doing. And I apologize if you're hearing my phone. I forgot to take it off the ringer. Yes, I still have a house phone.
Yeah, it's all good.
But so those are the things like I struggle with that because sometimes um I don't necessarily believe in capitalism at all. But there's some components of that individualism where you're supposed to do your part. But we don't we that is so broken in us that just trying so you have to do it in your own home. You have to do it, like you have to reteach it and retrain it. And then what that means is then you have to start putting the technology away because that's what's interfering with your functioning family. But then when you put it away, then there's probably no job market for you.
That's
There's
right.
nowhere for because you didn't learn it and everybody else is so advanced and stuff. So it's just really a ugly place for us to be in the world and in time because of all of this stuff with technology, AI, um, and then how you live in an economy. So if we were to go back and live like how we did, we would take down the fences and then we would go and get us some hides for a teepee, get us some teepee poles, and then we would move with the climate like our ancestors did. So I'd be heading south. You'd be heading south. We'd be going
Yeah,
somewhere down towards Nebraska, Colorado
that's
to
right.
survive, or Wyoming.
That's right. And I think that it's not our fault that we're born when we were born, right? So I don't blame, it's not, but I do think that the way that the climate movement, the environmental movement has put things like on us personally, like 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 you said, your plastic, all that kind of stuff. Like, I'm responsible for what happens in climate change, and we are responsible for stuff. But when we used to, harvest medicines and all that stuff, we'd make an offering. It was reciprocity, right? The plants are healing us, and we're giving back and appreciating each thing. And I think that's a part of what we've lost. That respect to and that honoring of everything. We don't honor ourselves. And so when it comes down to it, we can, say we protect we hug the trees and we protect the water and all that stuff. But, do we really, if we treat each other and ourselves, with, eating bad food and drinking and doing all that stuff? I mean, are we really protecting the water if we're not protecting our own water? And when I realized that, and that's something that it had to come because I've been an organizer for a long, 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 long time, and I didn't even understand that respecting myself was as important as respecting the trees and the water and all of that stuff. It's as important. We are the planet. We are our relatives, and how we treat ourselves is really more important, I think, than how we treat each other. Because we'll do a lot of, and that's how you can tell narcissists, because they in public they'll be nice to everyone in the whole community, and then at home they'll just be berating their family and treating their family like crap and doing all that stuff. And for the I said this before, like all the world's a stage. And for us, no, you're authentically yourself all the time. If you're a little weirdo every now and then, that's you. You're a little weirdo. But if you're nice to people in public and rude to your family in the back, that's a disconnect that Creator doesn't want. Creator wants us to be able to authentically, appreciate and love the beautiful, amazing, creation that is Earth. We have just this fantastically beautiful place, and yet we sit inside in our machines, in the air conditioner, and away from the planet, and don't even hear the birds sometimes in the morning. And it's just like we're sort of punishing ourselves for capitalism and for all that. And I was supposed to say about the DSA, the we have socialism in America right now for corporations and for wealthy folks. We have for a long time. You know, they get the more subsidies in South Dakota for farmers and ranchers than they get for poor people. And the government is socialized to the rich already. And you know, the Social Security that we're promised, that Roosevelt promised us and gave us, you know, he gave us this security. Why? Because these rich people didn't want to give us anything. They didn't want to give us, you know, a good job. They didn't want to give us, you know, they don't want to pay us anything. You know, I think that you know, because folks in America are so you know, no child left behind, they're all left behind, and they don't understand that you know, that these that the corporations are getting whatever they want, and they're taking more than they should be getting. Because like I said before, like what kind of climate impact I have is nothing compared to Elon Musk and Taylor Swift, who fly on their big giant ships and their planes like 15 minutes away. Like they, you know, the amount of climate impact that happens every Super Bowl when all these private planes fly into everywhere. You know, that is something that us guys, as you know, as regular people on the ground, will never be able to make that kind of impact. You know, the impact that's happening is the super wealthy, and those people need to be controlled. And you know, like someone said on Facebook, since all the food in America is poisonous, and you could you know, could die to, you know, or have diarrhea or whatever, we might as well start eating the rich. Because nothing, they're not going to kill us anyway. I don't want to be a cannibal, but because I don't want to eat no people. But I think that you know, socialism, you know, all these things, you know, I used to be you know, identify as a Democrat for like just 5 years, and then I stopped being a Democrat, and now I'm a Democrat again. But you know, I think that you know, we didn't create these labels. We didn't create these you know, the histories that are involved in these names and stuff. And so I don't really, you know, hold myself accountable to everything that the Democratic Party you know, does, especially because they're all mostly Zionists, right? And that's, you know, a big issue for me. And there was something else I was going to talk about, and I think it had, and we got to go now because it's almost the end of time. But you know, I think it had, you know, there's threats, and I want to talk about this. There's rumors that Iran is going to do some kind of you know, explosion, or they're going to do some kind of attack on American grounds. And so I guarantee you it's the IDF, right, who are doing it, because Iran has already said that they weren't going to target us. But I do feel like something's going to happen, and then Trump is going to try to nationalize the elections, and we're not going to have an election. The same way that Hitler did. You know, if you read the history of what Hitler did when he took office, Trump is doing the same things. And the Project 2025, they wrote it out for us. Now they're killing the wild horses. You know, but that's one thing I wanted to mention too. You know, they're rounding up the wild horses, 60 to 70,000 of them, and then shipping them out of the country so they can be killed. That's what they're doing. And you know, it doesn't look good, because you know, no one is really hopefully the midterms will happen and we won't have to, you know, worry about all of this stuff. But I actually don't have a lot of faith that it will. I do feel like there's some kind of they're cooking up something, and they're going to try to hold on to power as long as they can. He said in a speech yesterday he's going to get impeached. So he knows what's coming for him, and so they're going to do whatever they can to stay in power. And they don't care about people. You know, they would drop a nuclear bomb on folks, and that's, you know, I believe that. So anyway, I just wanted, you know, to say that you know, there's a lot of stuff that's happening with this administration that, like you said, it's too much. You know, it's too much happening all the time, and it's hard for us to pay attention. So
But that's how it was in 2016 or during that time too. It was real like and I remember myself, I'm just like, I'm not engaging, I'm not paying, I could care less what he's saying. I could care less, care less, care less. And so then I just didn't pay attention. And so I put in the chat a poll question that asks about the meat. So you were saying that about what Trump is doing. So I asked the question about uh, Trump says we are going to use foreign meat. Can we trust that? So, like, where's all the MAGA people? So that has been a thing, right? Like, where's all the MAGA people? Are they? And I'm seeing in Texas, Tellurico, there's like MAGA countries coming out for him, and they're showing up. And then you're hearing, farmers in Nebraska, which is a red state, farmers in Tennessee, I think it is, red state. I haven't heard anything about the farmers in South Dakota or North Dakota, but you're starting to see all these farmers, they're getting upset and they're mad because now we are not using doing American beef. Is a cow a cow? I don't know. And then there's the, how people will get all this, and then he's gonna slaughter the horses.
Well, but
And so
it's not.
that's gonna be in the so we don't know what kind of beef we're getting or meat or whatever. It could be cow or it could be horse. It could be like it's just not clear and all of this stuff. So yeah, there's
And
some
also, one of the things I read about is that they have the lab grown meat, right? They have lab grown meat, and Tyson, who is the meat packing guys, they have invested big time in lab grown meat. So it's probably lab grown, that's lab grown or horse meat. I guess that's what we're going to be eating. And I did eat horse meat once when I was in France, and I feel kind of bad because I love horses, but I tried it. It wasn't bad, but
well, in Israel. So, Israel is bombing the heck out of people, and so they're contaminating that whole place over there themselves.
yeah.
But they are growing food out of some kind of seaweed, and it's lab grown. And then because they have what are those called? Those 3D printers. They're producing this lab grown stuff. It's not meat, but they can make it taste like meat and they can make it feel like meat. And so you're thinking you're eating meat, but it's lab grown from seaweeds or whatever. And so and people are buying it. It's on the market, but we don't know because in America, we do not have a labeling of what we're actually eating. Other countries, they make you label that stuff and whatnot. But so that's kind of where we're going. And I don't
That's
know.
why,
Just stay
sleepy. It's why people get warnings to not eat our food when they come to America. It's why the one of the soccer teams brought in food, eggs and fruit, all that stuff, because our food is toxic. And I think that just goes, it's the same thing with the dumbing down of America, the illiteracy and all of this stuff. The corporate, they don't care about us. And I think that's exactly what it's showing. And that's you can't be governed by folks who hate you. And it just doesn't work like that way. And I mean we are, and that's why we're in a prison state, right? That's why we started, and ending up where we started. So in a prison state. Wow. We'll see you next week.
I'm just over in the chat. I'm sorry I'm chatting away with everybody.
No, that's good. I'm glad folks are engaging because
I was saying that about where's the beef is going to come back to be the new slogan.
Yeah.
We'll all be bringing those. Remember those old shirts with that grandma? Where's the beef?
But then Burger King was one of the first ones to do the lab grown meat. They're using.
I won't say, but I went to this school and they were providing food. And it was supposed to be a hamburger and you're looking and a hot dog, but they didn't taste like hot dog or they didn't taste like a hamburger. And this is a school in South Dakota. And so South Dakota schools, public schools, have to get their food from whoever the state says, you know. So yeah, we could already be eating that in our school systems and we don't even know.
Yeah, yeah, it's really sad, but if folks are worried about what they should buy stuff that say you on there or that are kosher because they don't poison themselves. And not to say that it's Jewish people that are doing it, it's the Zionists.
It's a Zionist capitalist, it's the billionaire class. I mean, they have so many different labels, but it's the same people.
Yeah,
And so it just depends on how you're looking at them. So the Zionists, we look at them from the perspective of Israel and trying to do away with the Palestinian people. But those Zionists are also the billionaires in the United States that are funding all of this propaganda, doing all of these different things. And if I remember to do it, I will share in the YouTube channel the YouTube that I was watching in regards to what we were or what they are doing and how they switched and they flipped the switch on us from FDR and that process of going backwards. And then you see how the billionaires use the media, how they took over the news systems and did all of that. And it's their plan. And so Project 2025 is a part of that plan. Their Project 2030 or 20 something is a part of that plan. And so who controls that is the billionaire class controls the Heritage Foundation. The billionaire class controls all of these things. And so just being able to talk about it in a way instead of saying, that's what we tell you, you know, that's one thing that irritates me about Project 2025 from the liberals or whatever is like, we told you that was going to happen. And but they've totally failed to acknowledge those parts of how nobody trusted Kamala Harris. Nobody trusted because people were saying, and all that woman had to do was say, I will stop the genocide, or I will stop what's happening to the Gazan people.
That's right.
I will do that. But she did it, and Trump did. So people said, okay, we're going to give Trump a chance because he said that, and people wanted to hear it. And then we got burned by Trump. I mean, I didn't vote for the guy, but those people that voted for him and said there'd be no more wars, all of those promises, well, now they've turned on him. So he's like at 30, I think they're saying 32% now. His and
Now
so
it's not only fake news, it's fake polls now.
Yeah. So he's in a deep dive. And so that's why he's trying to prep everybody about getting impeached because he knows that's going to happen. And so he's got to figure out what the narrative is for that 32%, for that 32% to continue to support him. And so the goal would be to get that 32% to 28% and to 25% and to 20% and so forth. You know, that would be the goal. And so we just got to keep at it and whatnot. But that's, if I remember to find it and share it, it should be in my watched, but I watch on different devices too. So just mess myself up. So anyways, thanks for joining with us today, Chaz. And if we're going to do the interviews, if you can ask him for a picture for me or whatever, I'll create a flyer that can be shared out that we'll do the interview and stuff like that. So
that's great. Okay, that's a good idea. Okay, thank you. We'll talk next week.
All right.
See you. Take care.
Yep.
Let me see. Well, can I get out of here? I don't know.
Just so you guys know, and I was trying to, elections are going on, and I had a update, but I don't know if it's the true update, and I was trying to get like what's the factual thing going on here. But the Oglala Sioux tribe, their thing closed on Friday, so they're candidates. And if I can find my picture, I saved it. Oh, there it is. So our candidates for president are Alicia Musso, Leonardo Solomon, John Long, Henny Whalen, Frank Starr comes out, and Julian Bear Runner. For vice president is Josie Eaglebull, Trina Lonehill, Yamni Jack, Justin Puyer, George Dreamer Jr., Emmanuel Black Bear, Mary Horse Felicia. For secretary, as far as I know, there's only one petition, and that's Rhonda Two Eagle. Treasurer is Julian Spotted Bear, Cora Whitehorse, and Cody Lee Catches the Enemy. So that's this is the list that was given to me. I don't know if there's any updated stuff for actual close of day of Friday. Maybe that came out on Saturday or Sunday. Fifth member was Edward Ironcloud III, Marlon Kelly, Philip Goodcrow, and Jane Rodriguez. And then into our districts, Lake Creek, you have Hermona DeBray, Norman Standing Soldier, and Craig Dillon. In Eagle Nest, you have Ron Beef Randall, Blaine Little Thunder, and Wesley Hawkins Sr. In Medicine Root, you have Jeremy Rosales, Ryan Jumping Eagle, Randy Hunter, and Ronald Red Owl. In Pass Creek, you have Doug Johnson and James Cross. In Porcupine, you have David Puyer and Tyler Lunderman. And then I had heard, but I don't know that an added name, because I wasn't able to get that information, was Randy Laysbad and Julie Two Eagle, but I'm not for sure. They may have pulled their things on this list, or it's a late list. So Wakbomni District, you have Marcus Palmer, Charles Standing Bear, Jackie Sears, and Reno Red Cloud. Whoops, my screen jumped. For Oglala District, you have Josh Williams, Tyler Yellowboy, Troy Little, Valerie Janice. Pine Ridge, you have Clayton Clifford and Bruce Whalen Sr. That's amazing. Pine Ridge, you usually have like hundreds of petitions, but now it's only one. You can only get one. So Wounded Knee District has Kevin Yellowbird Still, David Callie, Hobart Yankton, Joshua Still, Garfield Still, Kevin Big and Ramos Jr., and Madonna Her Mini Horses. So I'll just tell you, out of Wounded Knee District, that list, Kevin, Josh, Garfield, Hobart, they're all kind of the same voting block, the same families. And so I think they might wipe each other out. And you might end up, David Callie could be said of that too, just because of the family, he's married to. They're all the same, kind of around that Still family. So there could be maybe none of them advance because they wipe each other out. And then you might end up with Kevin Ramos and Madonna Her Mini Horses. So that's always the potential. I think that was it for our districts and stuff. So if I get more information, I will share that out. And kind of excited. They made a change, secretarial election. So we now vote for the treasurer, the fifth member, and the secretary at large. And the only issue I kind of had with that was they only need 30 signatures, when they should have had to have done 150 as well, because they are running at large. So it's a bigger voting block. And so they should have been able to have to do that, because you could just run straight in through your own family and get all your signatures and turn them in. Anyways, so that's that. And I don't know when, haven't seen their the voter when the primary election is. It's normally right around in October, and then November is the general. It runs along with the general election. So I don't know. Doesn't sound like a lot of change, right? But I don't know. So, all right. So you guys have a good rest of your week. Have a good rest of your day. I'm going to go hang out with my chickens and live the good life with them for a bit. And then I will see you next week. Maybe as Chaz is working on getting us an interview, we may be doing that next week. So just look for a flyer. I'll share it out on YouTube, and then you're more than welcome to share it out wherever you want to share it out. So